Atalanta and the boar. Often the greatest of heroes are born from the hardest of beginnings, and no hero or heroine had a harder beginning than Atalanta. "A girl!" her father shouted angrily when Atalanta was born. "What use is a girl? She will not fight. She will not hunt. She will not even have the strength to work the fields." So, while Atalanta's mother was still too weak to stop him, her father picked Atalanta up and carried her into the night. "I will leave her fate to the gods," he said, as he climbed Mount Parthenion. Then, only hesitating for a moment, he put the sleeping babe beside a rock, and he turned his back on her forever. There, alone in the dark, Atalanta began to cry. And with each cry, wild animals crept from the shadows. Their eyes shone with hunger. But the wild animals were not the only ones who heard Atalanta's cries. On Mount Olympus, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, also heard. She knew exactly what had happened. "Another girl abandoned by a cowardly father," she said angrily. "Well, this one will not be alone. No, this one will have my protection." With a smile, Artemis whispered secret words into the night. Back on Mount Parthenion, wolves, lions, and wild dogs were creeping closer to Atalanta. Suddenly, a mighty roar came from the darkness, and a huge brown bear charged the animals. One by one, the hungry beasts turned and fled. Soon, only Atalanta and the bear remained. The bear turned to Atalanta. It opened its mouth. Then, carefully, it picked Atalanta up with its teeth and carried her into the night. The bear took Atalanta to its cave. There, for many years, it looked after her. It brought her fruit to eat and water to drink. It kept her safe from harm and warm on cold nights. More than this, though, it taught Atalanta to be as brave and fierce as any wild animal. One day, when Atalanta was still very young, two hunters came to the cave. "A child," the woman said, her heart filling with love. "She's alone. We must take her home with us." Her husband agreed, but just as he knelt to pick up Atalanta, the bear moved slowly into the clearing. The hunters raised their bows, but Atalanta cried out. Understanding, the hunters waited, their hearts beating, but the bear did not attack. Instead, it nodded its mighty head once, looked into Atalanta's eyes, and moved back into the trees. Over time, Atalanta grew into a strong, intelligent young woman. Her new parents taught her the skills of the hunt, and no one in her village could shoot a bow as well as she did. When Atalanta wasn't hunting, she ran in the hills, swam in the rivers, or trained with sword and spear. The young men of the village did not know what to think about Atalanta. Some mocked her and called her names. These Atalanta fought, and soon they mocked her no more. Others tried to be Atalanta's friend by offering her help in her training. But to these, Atalanta only ever had one thing to say, that she needed help from no man. Deep down, Atalanta wanted to prove herself to the world. So, when she heard of a terrible boar tormenting the kingdom of Caledon, she knew what she must do. Wishing her parents farewell, Atalanta made the long journey to Caledon. She told herself that once she slew the monstrous boar, she would be proved equal to Greece's finest hunters and heroes. Yet, when she reached Caledon's palace, she found many of Greece's hunters and heroes already there, and there was nothing fine about them. "What joke is this?" a dark-haired hunter said when he saw Atalanta. "I will not hunt in the company of a woman." "Then go home, old man," Atalanta said. "At least then the boar won't smell us coming." Some laughed at Atalanta's joke, but the dark-haired hunter and his friends grew angry and drew their swords. Atalanta, with no other choice, prepared to fight. "Enough!" a voice shouted, and a young man put himself between Atalanta and the hunters. I am Meleager, Prince of Caledon. There will be no fighting. Save your strength for the boar." "Yes, Prince of Caledon," the dark-haired hunter replied. Meleager turned to Atalanta and smiled. "Forgive them. They are nervous about the hunt tomorrow. This boar is a creature like no other, with tusks as long as swords, and skin as thick as shields." Atalanta said nothing, and Meleager offered her his hand. "But you are welcome here, as are all who are brave enough to face the beast. If you want, we could hunt together tomorrow." "I do not need your help," Atalanta said, still angry, and she turned her back on the prince and walked from the palace alone. The sun rose blood red, and a gray mist clung to the forests of Caledon. Armed with her bow, arrows, and her father's long spear, Atalanta joined the hunt. As she followed the men into the trees, she saw many of them miss or confuse the animal tracks hidden in the soil. Only Meleager, it seemed, had the patience to search the ground carefully. But soon he too took the wrong path, and Atalanta watched him go with only a touch of regret. Alone then, Atalanta found and followed the boar's trail. Deeper and deeper into the forest it took her. Finally, in a clearing filled with broken bones and rusting weapons, she saw the beast. And as she looked at the terrible size of the Caledonian boar, Atalanta felt fear for the first time. But it was too late to turn back, and with a fierce shout she raised her spear. The boar was an ancient creature, older even than some of the gods. It lived only to feed and destroy, and when it saw Atalanta, it also saw its next meal. With a roar of anger, it charged towards her, its weight making the ground shake with every step. Atalanta shouted again and thrust her spear forward. But the boar's thick skin was too tough, and the spear broke with a deafening snap. Just in time, Atalanta jumped out of the way and rolled. As she rose to her knees, she saw the boar turning to charge her once again. She knew she only had one hope. She placed an arrow on her bow, pulled back her arm, and shot. The arrow struck, landing at the corner of the boar's eye. Atalanta knew it would not survive. She felt the briefest moment of victory, but then she saw the truth. The boar would fall, but not before it stumbled into her. In horror, Atalanta watched the boar stagger towards her. Suddenly, someone shouted Atalanta's name, and the huntress saw Meleager run into the clearing. He threw himself forward, his shoulder crashing against the boar. At the last moment, the boar was pushed aside. It fell next to Atalanta. "You did it, Atalanta!" Meleager said, amazed. "You conquered the boar!" The young prince held out his hand to raise Atalanta from the ground, but Atalanta did not move. "I told you," Atalanta said, her voice serious. "I do not need the help of any man." Meleager looked saddened by the words, and he began to lower his hand. Then, Atalanta took hold of his hand and let him pull her up. "But," she said with the faintest of smiles, "I will take the help of a friend." As the prince understood the meaning of her words, he smiled too. And somewhere on Mount Olympus, Artemis began to laugh.